irrevocable trust is great for pretty much just bypassing probate. There's zero asset protection. I mean, with a capital Z, zero asset protection in a revocable trust.
I really think that a whole bunch of people are actually where I'm at, where they don't even actually exactly know what a trust is. And it's sort of kind of confusing because when you look on social media, you have people saying all kinds of things about trusts. And they talk about trusts, and they talk about offshore, and a lot of people are just super uncredible. So maybe the basic question is just sort of, what is a trust again? Like maybe just start there because, I think a lot of people might be where I am and don't exactly know for sure exactly what this is about.
So what is a trust? Well, that's as ethereal as saying, what is a company? It's a abstraction. There's your word for the day. It's an abstraction. If it were something that was concrete, we would see trusts in the grocery store kind of left discarded on the ground or out in the park somewhere. Oh, there's a trust over here. I left one in my living room. Hold on, I got to get it out of here. Can you guys help me with this? So, it's an abstraction. It only lives in language and in documents. It's a contract that's private. I want to emphasize private. And it's the big benefit of a trust that it doesn't get filed anywhere. Nowhere does a trust get filed. And that's amazing because now there's nobody to say, well, that was incorrect, or, you should have filed that, but you were too late, or anything like this. It's a private agreement between parties. And the main purpose of a trust is to hold assets in trust from a grantor, somebody who's granting the assets into the trust, and held in trust by somebody called a trustee or an executor who is hands off, supposed to be hands off from the trust documents, trust stuff, just making sure that it's getting managed correctly in order that at some point in the future or ongoingly distributions of value that's been put in the trust go to beneficiaries. Eventually, all the stuff does go to the beneficiaries. So there's three kinds of folks in a trust. You got the trustee, person who's in charge of the managing it, the grantor, the person who's putting the stuff in, and the beneficiaries, folks getting the benefits. So that's pretty easy. Very different than a company where if you've got a partnership, there's managers and members. If you got a C corp, you got shareholders and directors. And it's much simpler, but they ain't no free lunch. Simple doesn't necessarily mean better. But before we get into what we don't like about them, let's talk about what we do like about them. They're private, so they're very difficult to find. In fact, if I took my audio gear, like this microphone and this microphone stand and the audio interface I have over here and some of the other microphones I have, and I put them into a trust, a specific kind of trust, and I was personally sued, then as long as this particular kind of trust was set up correctly, when they said you now have to tell the court everything you own under discovery, I don't claim that. I'm not committing perjury or fraud by not disclosing something that I don't own. Right? That makes sense. If I don't own it, why would I disclose that I have it? In this particular kind of trust, which we'll talk about in a second, if you put that in there, it's not that you don't have control over it. It's that you don't own it. And if you don't own it, then no one can take it from you because it's not yours. Hopefully that makes sense. This also works on the corporate side, but that's for later. So we're talking about trust today. So trust, that like Sterling said, there's like 88, there's probably even more now. There's like one popping up every week. It's crazy. It's like rabbits. Trusts are like rabbits. They're just not as cute.
Well, it's spring, so we're definitely getting more of each probably. So.
Probably. That's the popping up. Oh, look at that little cute trust over there.
Yes.
So a trust is a document. It's an agreement between parties. What's the agreement supposed to say? Well, that if I, the grantor, put stuff in here for John to manage, when I pass or when something else happens, John will then take care of the stuff and make sure it gets to Sterling and my son and my brother so that they're the beneficiaries, so that they get it eventually. And because it's coming out of a trust, they'll get it tax-free. So lots of benefits. And so this is pretty cool. There are different kinds of trust because there are different varieties, kind of little niggly things that we need to manage. So like one of the things that we've done with my family is we have a retirement plan trust. Retirement plan trust specifically has language in it that manages my dad's retirement accounts and his pensions, and all that other stuff. Does that mean that it's great? The only thing that we should use for retirement plans? No, it's one of the things. And what differentiates all the little different kinds of trusts, like the spendthrift and the complex and the spendthrift complex, retirement plan, living, life insurance, all of those are all differentiated really by just a paragraph in this trust. Most trusts have the same language for 90% of it. You're putting this stuff in, he's going to manage it, they're going to get it when he buys it, when he leaves the planet. And if he doesn't do it, then they get to vote for somebody new. And we have to be in the state of whatever. And if things go badly, this is how we're going to manage it. I mean, that's kind of the end of a trust. That's what a trust is. It literally is just an agreement. There's no magic. Once you get 90% of that stuff done, like every trust is virtually the same, then you specify. This has some specific rules around retirement plans. This has some special rules around my special needs child. This has some special rules around my life insurance. And so I don't want it to be subject to the estate tax. So I'm going to move it into this special trust, an irrevocable life insurance trust, so that I don't have to deal with the estate tax because it's a lot of money in here, et cetera. This is a spendthrift provision, which means that the beneficiaries can't get any special treatment. They don't get any kind of, they can't go to the trustee and go, can we get a little more, please? I'd like more, sir. No, shut up. Back to the gutter. No, that's what a spendthrift trust is. And you're like, well, that's kind of mean, isn't it? Well, in that case, yes. But if Johnny gets into a lawsuit and loses and they know about the trust, the guy with the ugly black dress and the silly little wooden hammer goes bang. And now everything in that trust goes to the plaintiff, Johnny, that we know you have. Well, the trust kind of loses out unless it's a spendthrift trust. Now Johnny comes back to the trustee of the trust and goes, hey, I got this judgment. I'm sorry. You're going to have to pony up. And the trustee goes, no, I don't. Hell no. This is a spendthrift trust. Nobody tells me what to do. And unless the trust said so, or I think so, that's it. Doesn't happen. So that judge can go whack his little hammer until he breaks it. It doesn't matter. Spendthrift trust. Got to walk away. No, nobody can add new things.
Wow. So why do people exactly, like, I can understand some of the reasons why people want these, but is there is there just different reasons why people would want these that maybe I'm not thinking of?
Yeah. So and I see Carolina Cat Lady. Oh, Carolina Cat Lady, welcome back. It's like old home week on Instagram. So what she says is, can I put my LLCs that own my rentals in a revocable trust for extra legal protection? It's a great question. And so far, everything that I've been talking about, everybody kind of generally understands. Okay, yeah. This is how they work. Yeah, the ball guys doesn't ruffle any feathers yet. But now we're going to ruffle feathers. And to answer your question as well, Sterling. So we said there's 80 odd kinds of little trusts. But that 90% of the document that is the same boils all trusts into two varieties: revocable, irrevocable. Now, some people will say grantor and non-grantor, which is, it's not quite synonymous, but they're about the same. What was that, Sterling?
No, that's just surprising that all of them fit in two categories. So,
well, you'll see why in a second. So revocable, what Carolina Cat Lady was saying, and irrevocable. What's the difference? A revocable, and I know for you guys that are really into trust, you're like, well, that's not exactly the same as a grantor trust. I know, but just go with me. Generally, a grantor is the same as a revocable, and a non-grantor virtually is the same as a irrevocable. Not exact. I am with you. Generally, we split them up because there's only really those two varieties as designated by the IRS in terms of the latest revenue resolution 2023-2 that came out in March of 2023. That says this is how these goes. And it also references the intentionally defective grantor trust, which is a whole other thing we're going to talk about if we have time. So back to what we're talking about. So what about the revocable trust? What is that about? The revocable trust is what most folks have. They're great for protecting you from probate. In fact, all trusts protect you from when you pass and you didn't quite plan correctly. And maybe all you have is a will, which doesn't protect you from probate, by the way. It's all going to go to these guys at the state or the county. They're going to take all your stuff. They're going to smoke for a while, like a couple, 3 years, and then finally go, these things ought to go to that. These things ought to go. And we're going to take 30% out of your estate for our trouble, or worse. There's ways to protect against that on the corporate side, which we do all day, every day. But on the trust side, every trust protects against probate once it's set up correctly, once it's written correctly. Because once you put stuff into a trust, it's not yours technically. Maybe it is, but we'll get into that. But there's instructions in the trust so that probate, the reason probate exists is because people don't know, like, how would anybody know that the Bentley's supposed to go to John and, you know, the $4 million house in the Hamptons is supposed to go to Susie? How do we know that? Because your will doesn't quite have the legal oomph to make that happen. So probate comes in. But a trust does, because there's a notary signature from the trustee that says, I will adjudicate and make sure everything here goes as planned. And so probate goes, okay, as long as you're good with that, we'll go on to some other suckers. Cool. A revocable trust, like an irrevocable trust, protects you from probate, which is almost all trusts. But a revocable trust is one where you get to stay in control of the stuff you put in there. You get to put stuff in there and you get to kind of keep using it. Now, you can't be a beneficiary of a revocable trust if you're a grantor. That's a no-no. In no trust can you be a grantor and a beneficiary unless you're in one of these cool state ones like the ones they have in Wyoming. That's a whole different thing. But generally, these trusts don't allow you to be a beneficiary of your own stuff. That's really called money laundering. It really is. And then in a revocable trust, you have all the control. You can put stuff in there. You can mess with it. So you can put your house in a revocable trust. It bypasses probate now when you pass. And you can keep living in the house. That's perfectly legitimate. All the taxes of that trust, if it makes money, will pass through to you on your 1040. It's why the IRS calls a revocable trust a disregarded entity. It's not really its own entity. It's just you. And then when you pass, that revocable trust becomes irrevocable, meaning that however it was written before, once you passed, can't be changed, except for some special reasons, which we'll talk about. And now it gets its own EIN. It gets its own taxes. It's going to file a 1041 form instead of the one that's coming on your form, etc. Which hopefully by now you get the idea that if you're fooling around with a trust and you're all stuff in there, you can change it. Absolutely. If you're like, oh no, I have a second Bentley now. Let's put that in the trust too. Can you do that? Of course. Absolutely. Take stuff in, pull it out. That's why it's called revocable. You can revoke the trust completely and put it all back in your name. Just know.
What happens when your sister makes you mad and then you're like, right, I don't want to leave her that Bentley after all. And it's a Thursday. You just take her out?
Cut her out.
Wow.
Right
and
away.
if you don't have to file it anywhere, who would even know if you took her out?
No one would know. Which is why
crazy.
every change that you make into a trust, you have to go to a notary and create a notary acknowledgement. Otherwise, same with a will. Not that a will matters much, but yeah. So to answer your question, Carolina Cat Lady, can I put my LLCs that I own in my rentals in a revocable trust for extra legal protection? Yes, yes, yes. But there isn't any more legal protection. That's the rub. This is what the state attorneys are not going to tell you. And we had somebody come to us, I don't know, a couple of years ago. And we'll talk about this more on Thursday night on the 27th. But they were in big trouble. They went to an estate planning attorney to put their rentals, just like what you're talking about, Carolina Cat Lady, into and he said, oh, we'll put it in a revocable trust and that'll help. Well, when there was a lawsuit, all of their properties were in discovery because there's no separation between you and that kind of revocable trust. It's really just you. Like I said, the IRS considers it a disregarded entity. It's not real entity. It's just you. Now, once you pass, then yes, it becomes irrevocable and it is separate from you. Of course, you're dead, but that's different. So the revocable trust is great for pretty much just bypassing probate. There's zero asset protection. I mean, with a capital Z, zero asset protection in a revocable trust. That's the revocable. Let's talk about the irrevocable. Irrevocable trust is the most powerful asset protection there is in America. Somebody sues you and you have stuff in an irrevocable trust, ain't nobody getting it. I'm sorry, that's not going to happen as long as you've been playing by the rules. Well, what are the rules? Remember how I said that the revocable trust, you can never be the beneficiary if you're the grantor, but you can kind of be the trustee while you're alive. You can be both. If you do that in an irrevocable trust, they're blowing it up, y'all. Listen, son, they're going to blow that up because an irrevocable means once it's written, and this is as of the new revenue resolution in 2023, the IRS put out, you can't change that trust. You can't go in and change it because your sister got mad. There's a rule around it that you could, but all the beneficiaries have to agree under notarial acknowledgement. They all arrive. The notary goes, oh, yes, there's all of you guys. And now you all agree that you're going to change the trust. Okay, well, but with your sister, you got mad at your sister. Well, she's not going to agree. She's going to be like, heck no, you're not cutting me out. And now it can't be cut out. And if you still cut her out, your irrevocable trust is gone. If under scrutiny, anything happens, that's gone. It's as if it never existed and it's all in your name, including the taxation and the legal precedent and all of this stuff. So what are the rules around an irrevocable trust? Very stringent rules. And, there's no free lunch, y'all. Y'all know that by now. So very stringent rules. Irrevocable trust, the grantor stays the grantor. Doesn't become ever a beneficiary. Certainly not a trustee. We have to have a separate person or thing that is a trustee. If I'm the grantor, I put my stuff in. Once in and signed, I can only ever revoke 5% of it back to me. I can only control 5% of it. I can't move any of it offshore. I can't change the trust except that all the beneficiaries agree. I can't materially participate in the trust. I cannot be paid by advantage of the trust anymore because I'm a grantor. Well, can't the trustee get paid? Yeah, of course. But that's not you. It's not you. You can't be the trustee. Trustee can get paid for their time, and that's fine. That's reasonable. But that means that everything you put into an irrevocable trust, you have to walk away from. Well, no wonder it's the number one greatest asset protection thing in the world, because you really don't own it, and it sure doesn't look like you have it because you don't have any control over it. No little mitts on it. And that includes your house. Oh, I put my house into an irrevocable trust. When you say your house, do you mean the one you're living in now? Oh, yeah, sure. Well, then you don't have an irrevocable trust. Even if it says it is, you've blown it up. It's a revocable trust. No matter, even if you have an EIN for it and you've been filing a 1041 for taxes, if anybody looks at what you did, you broke the rules of the revenue resolution in 2023 that they finally established, thank God, because everybody's playing fast and loose. So, yes, there's some pretty cool things in an irrevocable trust that you can do, but you have to be prepared to walk away from it all. And if that's something that's valuable to you, now you got some great stuff going on, because now 100% asset protection, capital gains, no capital gains to the people that are going to get it, the beneficiaries. You got also no estate tax. So when you pass, none of that stuff's going to be included in your estate. And it just goes on and on and on. It's really, really cool. On top, so yeah, did you have a question?
Yeah, I was just trying to think about what all I could put in a trust, right? So, like houses, that makes sense, and cars, that makes sense. But, I know you have an amazing piano, right? Because you're a composer. And so would you want to put a piano in a trust? Because you still use your piano, right? So how does that work? Could you use it? Would it be okay to keep using it?
It'd be okay if it was in a revocable trust. Yes, because now I'm the grantor or the trustee if I want, and I can revoke it back to me if I need to. So it could be in the trust and I can still use it. It's very fluid. It's very easy, but I don't get any asset protection that way. And if I was making money with the piano, or if I sold the piano and had a capital gain, there's no tax benefit to me because the taxes are just going to come right back to me on my 1040. If it was in an irrevocable trust, then yes, I could not use it. It probably couldn't sit in my house. And it probably would have to go sit in storage somewhere, or someone else, or maybe the trustee would have it. And that's where being a trustee can be very valuable if you set this up correctly. So now a trustee can be the one who's got all the control and no ownership. The trustee makes out like a bandit on an irrevocable trust. But in this case, if it was my piano first, I put it into an irrevocable trust, I'll never use it again. And if the trust did sell the piano, has a capital gain, let's say, irrevocable trusts have the second worst taxation in the code, 37+% on anything over $15,000. There is no tax like that anywhere except maybe the double taxation of a C corporation. So everybody's like, oh, we do our business in a trust. I hope not. I really do, because trusts are not meant for doing business. Let's see. Does the trust have to pay for the asset out into it? Says K Thorne 86. I think what you mean is getting stuff into the trust. Most people gift their stuff into a trust, and that's fine. You can do that. There's no reason not to. We don't gift things on the corporate side. That's not cool. We don't do that. But we do gift things into trust. But remember this, we have an estate tax, which is horrific, 40%. But we also have a gift tax that's also 40%. Right now, it's pretty high. And on January 1st, it's going to drop way, way, way down, like more than 50% down is what we expect. Right now, it's about $12 some odd million per person, which is like, okay, that's a lot. Even I think that's a lot. But January 1st is coming down unless Congress gets busy and renews the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act to below 7 million. And you're like, well, that doesn't really apply to me. Oh, doesn't it? We're at 10 to 15% inflation right now, regardless of what you hear on the news. Go look at the Federal Reserve website and go check your price of groceries. And you tell me that we're at 3% a year and have been for the last 5 years. I don't think so. So the price of everything is going to go up, including the value of the houses and the assets that you hold, so that when you die in 20, 30, 40, 50 years, I promise you're going to have a $7 million estate easily. And your life insurance death benefits are taxed on the estate tax. And that estate tax is inextricably linked to the gift tax. So if you have $10 million worth of stuff that you want to put into a trust and the estate tax or the gift tax maximum is 7, guess what? You're going to pay 40% tax on $3 million, which is, as you know, $1.2 million just to put the stuff into your trust. Mm-hmm. That's gross. It's the worst. Let's see. Carolina Cat Lady. Oh, you're still here. Oh, thank you. Is there a certain percentage I have to allocate for paying for the trustee services for an IT? Does it vary by state? No, it just be reasonable. It's a good question. Reasonable wages for a reasonable time. You know, you don't want to have it where it's clear the trustee is sucking money out of the trust on the side, you know, because they're getting paid $10,000 an hour, you know, and well, that's never going to work under scrutiny. Plus the beneficiary is going to get mad. And by the way, Sterling, who is the biggest enemy of the trusts that we set up?
I don't know. Maybe Cruella de Vil. I'm not sure.
Cruella de Vil. Definitely. If I had Cruella de Vil in my trust, I would be concerned. And quite frankly, I'd be trying to figure out how to weasel that car out of her.
I know. That was a great car. That was the best thing about that movie.
That really was. That car with the air intakes coming out the side. That is so cool. I wish I could find out what sound design they used when they actually what car they actually used to make it in like the original version, because it just sounded so beefy.
They have a new version that I didn't know came out until the other day. I randomly found it on Spotify. I was like, there's a Cruella soundtrack. And I was like, oh, I wonder what this is. And I saw, oh, there's a new movie. I missed that somehow. And I think it maybe happened during COVID, which I was one of the people not watching TV during COVID. I thought that was way more stressful to leave the TV on. So I didn't watch that. All the people watched the TV shows during COVID. I didn't do that sort of thing. So.
I was with you. Yeah, I moved to the sticks away from all the zombies, and we didn't have TV for a while. So that was great. I loved it.
No, we're just the weirdos. No, but the enemy, I don't know. Well, if it's not Cruella de Vil, I'm not sure who it is.
So think about this. And that's fair. Not a lot of people think about, well, why would we have enemies in a trust? Some people would say, well, like the guys that want to come take the stuff out of the trust and sue you. And, well, yeah, that's the thing, but that's not the number one enemy.
What about the probate guy?
Yeah, the probate guy's not an enemy because he has to walk away. They knock on the door. Hey, I heard your buddy died. Your dad died. Sorry, this is probate. Do you have a trust? Is what they're going to say. And you're going to go, yes. And then they're going to say, we need to examine it. And you better know where that trust is. In my book, we talk about the 3 ways that your trust is broken. Well, one of them is you don't know where the trust documents are. And by the way, if you're a beneficiary and you don't have a copy of the trust documents, you may not get anything. How many times have I heard this? Somebody will call, especially when we were first starting this business. Somebody would call and say, I need help. My aunt took all the stuff from the trust. How do I get it back? My aunt, I took all the documents and she's got all the houses and the cars and the money and the crypto. She's got it all, but I'm a beneficiary. How do I get that stuff back? And my first question is, do you have a copy of the trust? No. Then you're not. Because the only contractual memorialization is that trust. And if you don't have a copy of it, why is she going to give it to you? She's very smart to make sure nobody had a copy of the trust. Only her. So now she's indefensible unless she does something stupid. So if you're a beneficiary, you've got to be sure you've got a copy of the trust and go to your trustee right now, or not maybe tomorrow, and say, I'd like a copy of the trust, please. They cannot resist you if you're a beneficiary.
Wow.
They cannot say, no, you don't get a copy. Now you're a bad trustee. Now you're going to get fired because now you're not executing your duties as a trustee. I've asked for a legitimate request for a copy of the trust. And then if somebody makes off with the trust, you can go to the court and go, this is what my trust said, signed by my dad with the acknowledgement of the notary. What do you have, Sheila or Cruella DeVille? Oh, well, then that gets ugly. But if you don't have a copy of a contract, how are you going to defend that you thought you had rights in this contract? You don't. You can't. So make sure y'all got a copy of the trust.